Hey, this is a very impromptu live conversation, and I am having it and storing it because I don't feel like doing a short reel. I don't feel like doing that, and I can't condense this to a couple of things. So I'm going to give myself the latitude to do that. And this is going to be a really compact reel, so I'm not going to elaborate for on and on and on and on. So there are basically 4 things that I want to share. I'm going to put this up online. Hopefully it could be a resource for folks. So I want to talk about a post that I made today, which is some inclusive language. Oh, I think my friend Bobby is here. My brother Bobby Morgan here. Follow the Liberated Lab if you're not following and learning from Bobby Morgan. My sister Sonia's here. Yay, 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 yay. So all these amazing, beautiful Black people that I love and trust. So I just want 4 things. So I made Bobby and I just came from a panel, and now I'm just doing a lot of teaching today. Hey, Corey. All right. So, I made a post today about more inclusive terms, relating to people who are birthing. All right. And people have a lot of feelings and have a lot of reasons for having feelings. So this is this is a place. It is okay to disagree. It is okay to have questions. It is okay to make space for more, right? All of these things make space for more. So let's just start with that, right? More inclusive terms. So I want to talk about this. I also want to create an invitation. So what yesterday and even today and some of the responses I'm getting in my DM tells me there's an opportunity for some public learning here. So if you are someone who is Black and Indigenous, who identifies as non-binary or trans, I would love for you to connect with me in the DMs, and then we can connect offline to provide some opportunities for you to go live with me to have a conversation, because I think there's a lot of learning to be done here. I want to name that I'm a cis-het woman, all right? I am cisgendered. I am a heterosexual woman. I am protected by my sexuality in these United States, all right? So there are places where, because of my subject position, my social identity, I am not protected. I am not protected in my Blackness. I am not protected in my womanhood, but I am protected in being a cisgendered person, a heterosexual person in a heteronormative world, in a transphobic world, right? So I want to name that, acknowledge that. That does not take away from the other things. It is a both and approach, all right? So there are a lot of feelings for a lot of women identifying folks around this idea of using the term birthing, right? Birthing people, labeling people. So let's talk about it. I want to name my limitations. I am someone who identifies as a woman, all right? So I'm taking my cues, and I'm also opening my ears for what are trans and non-binary people saying in this moment in relationship to their experience with reproductive justice. Because my story is not the only story that exists, right? So there are a lot of concerns. And last night I had a great conversation. I don't know if this person wants me to share their name or not. They've not consented to that. But I had an amazing conversation with someone that I deeply trust and value. And we started talking about what are the moving parts here. And there are a lot of labels and there are a lot of layers here, right? And I started, and this is who I am in the world. I'll open up a book real quick, ooh, are there answers? And so I started doing some reading and some thinking through and reflection. When we use the term birthing people or labeling people, we are just making space for more, right? That's it. Inclusive language allows us to do 2 things. It allows us to be more specific, because violent systems would have us all be monolithic and just condensed to one thing. Okay, great. Bobby is the person that that we started having this conversation yesterday, Bobby Morgan, a dear brother and friend. So Bobby and I started thinking through some of these things, and it left me with a lot of questions. Inclusive language allows us to make space for more identity, more experiences. And whiteness, white supremacy culture, the patriarchy would have us just deduce all women to all women, all Black people to all Black people, and not recognize the diversity even in those groups, right? So it lets us make space for more. And as we work to do any level of anti-oppression work, whether it's relating to race or gender or sexuality, leading with specificity is usually super, super helpful. All right. It's usually very helpful to lead with specificity in our language. So that's the first thing I want to say, that inclusive language is not created to erase. It can do that sometimes. Okay? So, for example, something like POC, that term was created in the 70s, but it was really kind of created in the sense that Black people were like, hey, how can we make people pay attention to our needs and wants in this moment? If we just put our needs and wants in connection to other brown people, maybe people will pay attention to Black people. That's not the kind of inclusivity or the inclusive language that I want to be supportive of. All right? In that instance, it was something that was created to like shield us and hide us in with another group of people. But when we think about terms like birthing people, right, this is something that people who aren't cisgendered saying, like, these are things that will help us name our experiences alongside other types of people who birth, like mothers. And so my post today was like, hey, y'all, we can still use the term mother. No one is saying don't use the term mother. I'm saying we can also add, right? So mothers and birthing people, right? We can just add to that. And that in itself provides the opportunity for more. And it also says we're not erasing people who identify as women. We're not erasing people who really are very thoughtfully naming themselves as mothers, right? So the and here can be a powerful tool. And as we divest from whiteness, as we engage in our decolonial work, we have to reject binary thinking that says it's either or. We have to reject the idea that you're either a woman or a man. We have the idea that you're either, like this, you're Black or white, you're a woman or a man, you're fat or you're skinny, right? We have to learn how to make space for the and. That is important. And I am not going to get into a whole bunch of post-structuralist theory here about the grammatics or the rules of grammar and logistics that forces us to think this way too, because our brains are pretty lazy, all right? So I'm not telling that people that they can't use the term mother or father, woman or man. What I am saying is, in this particular case, when we're fighting for equal protections and rights and access, right? In our anti-oppression work, we have to always be thinking access. And so in this regard, inclusion, or specifically inclusive language, is important because it allows for greater access to the conversation. We also have to recognize that, and this is a hard bite to chew for a lot of us, that oppressed people can be oppressive. I'm going to say that 2 more times. Oppressed people can be oppressive. Oppressed people can be oppressive. And a lot of that is because we are in a state of not having enough protection, not having enough access to resource. And when you are in that, you are often, again, lizard brain. Lizard brain attached to our spine is like, I don't have enough of the things I need. And it creates us to think limited. And I'm not judging people for being in their lizard brain, all right? But what I'm saying is your brain will send you the message that dangers exist, even if they're real, but sometimes imagined, right? And so, unfortunately, multiple systems have taught us that if somebody else is getting access to something, then I won't get access to it. And that is a lie. That is a lie. That is a lie. So so I think there are people who are feeling like, hey, if people are no longer saying women in certain conversations, then that means that women aren't going to get the resources that they need. And women already aren't getting the resources they need. And that is true. When we think about something like Black maternal mobility, y'all know the word I'm trying to use here. I'm sorry. But like Black women and Black birthing people are not getting the access they need. They are not getting the protections they need in a profit-centered healthcare system. So I can see how women who already feel like I'm already not getting the shit that I need, and then we're adding this other layer to the conversation. But that's our lizard brain talking. Our lizard brain is saying that we need to keep the focus on one group of people so that we can get the things. And I'm saying we can hold much more. We can hold much more. So when we use inclusive language, what we're saying is we're thinking from the margins to the center. We're putting all the people who are the least protected by a system or an institution at the forefront. So when we're using inclusive language like birthing people or laboring people, right, reproductive folks, alongside things like mothers, what we're saying is, hey, not only are women experiencing these things, but people who don't identify. And really what that should have us start thinking is we're asking for the community of people who are still experiencing violence that is in alignment. That's solidarity. That is solidarity. And it is not erasing our concerns, right? When I am a woman who is saying that non-birthing people need access, I am not minimizing. I am recognizing in solidarity that other people who don't have my lived experience need support too. All right? And so I'm not saying that everyone has to do the work of necessarily... while you're including other people in the story, that doesn't mean you're minimizing yourself in the story. So please feel free to just use the and here. The and is inclusive, but the and also allows people who say, I am a woman, to also feel like they're a part of that story. And it's sad because violent systems and the nature of violence, and I don't want to get into a lot of theoretical posturing here, but the nature of violence will have us short-circuited. It will. It will have us short-circuited. So you could be a woman who's advocating for women's rights and access and advocacy. And then solidarity says, but I can also make space for the ways that this shows up in places that are not directly related to my lived experience. All right. So both of those things can be true. All right. Yes, we do need to talk about what women are not experiencing in terms of protection, the failure of medical practitioners to listen to women, the lack of resources when it comes to certain kind of medical procedures now, right? All of those are things that impact women. And also what is true is that these are things that impact people who aren't women either. I have told myself, and I consistently tell myself as a cisgender Black woman, there will be things that I will have to make space for Black trans women. I will have to make space for Black feminist people. I will have to make space for non-binary people, right? Because I'm protected in my straightness in ways that they aren't. In my sexuality in ways that they aren't. In my gender expression in ways that they aren't. And so for me, specifically as someone who the work is about Black liberation, I have to always make space for the people in the room who are least protected. And inclusive language allows us to do that. So in summary, again, if you're someone who is trans or non-binary and want to have public conversations, and you don't have to, right? Because that is, not everyone is called. Not everyone with lived experience is called, right? But if you would like to have a live conversation with me, feel free to connect with me in the DMs and we could talk about what that means. Secondly, we operate from the position of people from the margins need to be centered. All peoples from the margins need to be centered. We reject binary thinking. That is a tool of colonialism. We can introduce a both and approach to our lives. And so we can have conversations that say, yes, what happened with Roe yesterday violates women and birthing peoples everywhere. It doesn't cost us to be inclusive in this way. And if anything, history has shown us when we have that approach of only one of us can have a part of this conversation, like a specific site would be when we think about something like women's suffrage. Susan B. Anthony and them decided, yes, there are enslaved women and there are free Black women who are working alongside us in this movement, like Sojourner Truth, like Harriet Tubman. But right now we're going to choose to center white women because we want to get across the finish line. We cannot repeat that history here. We cannot as cisgendered women be like, we got to center women in this story if we want to get across the finish line when it comes to reproductive rights. We cannot be the people who are like, hey, we are going to have to center white women if we want to get across the finish line. That we've seen that time and time again, and that is not a helpful strategy, and it doesn't create sustainable change, right? In that case, white women, white cishet women, were experiencing violation in the current system, the patriarchy, right? They weren't named as full humans, right? And so they were an oppressed group of folks, full stop. And no one can take away from the Susan B. Anthonys of the world, right? But unfortunately, that binary thinking allowed them to say, well, we have to choose who matters most in this conversation. And there's a time and place. And sometimes you do have to choose who is the least protected in this instance, and how do we care for them? How do we carry them? That's a whole nother conversation. I want to be careful with my language. There will be times when I have to say, you know what, Black trans women matter more in this moment, and they have to be protected. They need the most immediate care, right? But in those cases, Susie B. Anthony and them also didn't recognize that they were protected in whiteness. And unfortunately, we saw white women choose whiteness as the strategies for success consistently. I love what my sis said. Not all uteruses are honed by women, and not all women have uteruses. Yes, powerful, powerful truth. Ulanike shared that. Thank you so much. So anyway, I just want to give us some things to think about, that as a cis het woman, I am not in danger by adding new language to this conversation. I am not losing anything by recognizing that people who have different lived experiences than me, different gendered experiences than me, different gender expressions than me, I'm not losing anything by using inclusive language that puts them in the story alongside me, right? And we don't have to continue to minimize other people's stories just so that our stories can be heard, right? Especially considering some of the broader contexts, right? Like I said, there's a place for specificity, right? There will be places to talk about how reproductive justice for Black women matters. There will be places to talk about how reproductive justice for Latinx women, we should cultivate those experiences for sure. Those are worthwhile investments to make. But also in our language use, being more inclusive means that, hey, we're recognizing that other people are deeply impacted, and that is us acting in solidarity. All right. If anyone has any questions, I will answer them, but I also want to name my limited scope of knowledge here as a cis het woman. And it doesn't take away from me to acknowledge that limited scope right? And then, like I said, I invite people who have an embodied experience that I don't have to be a part of these conversations. I think we can learn a lot from people who are in the margins in multiple ways. Kimberly Crenshaw's version of intersectionality, because some of y'all's version of intersectionality ain't it. All right. So there's that part, right? Recognizes that we all kind of have different placeholders in this society, and we all experience the violence of colonialism. We all experience the violence of supremacy culture, of whiteness, patriarchy, and capitalism. We all experience those differently, right? And so making space for that is how we find out how to be in solidarity. I know the very real feelings that Black women may have in terms of erasure. Okay, so this one right here, I'm being really specific for Black women. We show up and we have to do a lot to be heard. So I want to name that. And so that's why I bought this conversation in the humility of that, recognizing how some people say, hey, I'm a woman and I already feel silenced in my homes, in my neighborhood, at my job. Women who have had to hide pregnancies, literally at work, for a variety of reasons. Those are real things that women experience. But it doesn't take away from us to also make space for the experiences that non-cis het folks experience too, right? So have that both and position that can help guide us in this moment. All right, those were my 2 cents. Again, feel free to say women and birthing people. The and ain't gonna, it usually will not hurt folks depending on how you're using it. All right, but you can make space for more. All right, y'all, enjoy the rest of y'all's weekend.